I never thought working private security off-world would feel so much like being a circus animal, but here I was, standing in the middle of the most expensive docking bay I had ever seen, while a 8-limbed alien in a silk robe looked at me the way someone looks at a package that arrived in the wrong size. "You are small," Chamberlain Osivek said. His 8 eyes blinked in a slow, rolling wave, one after another. "I get that a lot," I said. "My name is Cale Draven, former Earth Special Forces, current licensed off-world security contractor. I had worked on 3 planets before this job, and every single time, the client looked at me like I was a mistake. I had learned to let it go. The ones who underestimated me early were always the ones who thanked me the most later, if they were still alive to do it." The station was called Aurelis Prime, an orbital platform that floated above a gas giant like a crown nobody asked for. Everything on it was either gold, white, or glowing softly in colors that had no names in English. The hallways were wide enough to drive a truck through. The ceilings were high enough to make you feel small even if you were not already short by alien standards. I had arrived with 1 bag, 2 sidearms, a med kit, and 17 years of experience that nobody here would believe until they needed it. Osivek led me through the corridors with the energy of someone deeply unhappy about a decision someone else had made. He explained the job as we walked. My client, Her Grace Seraphine Vel-Oreth, High Duchess of the Vel-Oreth Trading Consortium, was traveling to a political summit on a planet called Veth 4. There would be trade negotiations. There would be 3 formal galas. There would be lots of very important, very wealthy aliens shaking each other's hands and smiling while thinking about how to ruin each other. "She needs a guard who looks appropriate for the occasion," Osivek said, with the tone of someone who had already decided I did not qualify. "She needs a guard who keeps her alive," I said. "Those 2 things are not always the same." He stopped walking and looked at me with all 8 eyes at once. Then he kept moving without saying anything. I took that as agreement. We reached the docking bay, and I used the next 4 minutes doing what I always do when I enter a new space. I mapped it. I noted the 2 security cameras with blind spots near the fuel coupling stations. I counted the entry and exit points. I identified the 3 places where someone could hide a weapon in a bag and walk through without triggering the standard Lyrian bioscan, because the bioscan was calibrated for species with iron-based blood and would miss half the galaxy. I found the service corridor behind the east wall that bypassed the main security checkpoint entirely. 17 vulnerabilities in 4 minutes. I did not say anything about them yet. I found a wrench in an equipment panel, borrowed it without asking, and started tightening a loose coupling on the wall near entry point 3. A loose coupling near a fuel line was not a security risk exactly, but it was the kind of small, ignored thing that became a very large problem under the wrong circumstances. Osivek came back to find me crouched by the wall with a wrench. "What are you doing?" "Fixing something," I said. "That is not your job." "Everything in a 30-meter radius of my client is my job," I said, and stood up, and handed the wrench back to the panel. I met Seraphine Vel-Oreth an hour later, in a reception room that probably cost more to furnish than my entire home city. She was tall, even by Lyrian standards, with silver skin that shifted and glowed faintly at the edges, like starlight trapped just under the surface. Her eyes were deep violet, and they were sharp. Whatever else she was not soft in the mind. You could see that immediately. She looked at me for a long moment, then she asked where I was from. "Earth," I said. She did not recognize it. She looked at Osivek, who had already pulled up something on his datapad. He read it quietly. His chromatophores, the color-shifting patches on his skin that served as his secondary emotional display, went completely still. That was a Druathi stress response. I had read about it in the briefing files. It meant he had read something that surprised him badly. Seraphine looked at the pad, then back at me. Something in her expression changed by about 3%. You would not notice it unless you were trained to watch for micro-expressions. I was. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Draven," she said. "Thank you, Your Grace," I said. "I already found 40 vulnerabilities in your docking bay. I will send you a written summary." She blinked. 40. I was being conservative. She stared at me for another 2 seconds, then dismissed me with a very elegant gesture that I was fairly certain meant she did not know what to do with me yet. That was fine. They never did, at first. The ship to Deathworld was a Lyrian cruiser named something I could not pronounce, which I privately called the Silver Bell in my head, because of the sound the hull made when we hit the upper atmosphere layer on departure. It was a beautiful ship, smooth lines, efficient internal layout, crew of 22, and a passenger section that felt like a floating palace. I spent the first 6 hours walking every corridor twice. Somewhere around the second day of travel, we passed through what the crew called a debris corridor. It was marked on the charts as a minor navigational nuisance, and the ship's pilot guided us through it with the bored professionalism of someone who had done it 100 times. Nothing about it seemed alarming to anyone on board. I was not alarmed either. I was, however, paying attention. I heard the sound about 2 seconds before the alarm registered it, a very small, high-pitched tone that the ship's structure made when it was under uneven pressure. I was already moving toward the side corridor before the warning light came on. By the time the 3 Lyrian attendants in that corridor registered what was happening, I was at the hull panel, reading the fracture indicator with one hand, and pulling the emergency sealant kit from my jacket pocket with the other. The fracture was small, a micro crack along a seam near a viewport, caused by a piece of debris no bigger than my thumbnail. It had created a slow pressure leak that would have turned into a serious decompression event in about 4 minutes. The automatic systems would have handled it in 5. I handled it in 2, bracing the seam manually, while the sealant set, which involved pressing my bare hands against a metal surface that was cold enough to sting. Not dangerous, just uncomfortable. When I turned around, the 3 attendants were still frozen in the posture Lyrians adopt when they are frightened, which involves folding the secondary arms tight and going very still. They stared at me. I asked if anyone wanted tea. Only one of them answered, a small Lyrian named Ven, who had been assigned to travel with Seraphine's staff. She said, very quietly, "You ran toward it." "Yes," I said. "It could have been much worse." "It was not, though," I said, and walked back toward the main corridor. Seraphine found me later that evening, sitting in the small observation lounge at the back of the ship, going through the Deathworld Summit guest list for the 3rd time. She sat across from me without asking, which told me she was used to not having to ask for things. I moved the datapad so she could sit more comfortably. "You were not afraid," she said. "It was not a question." "I was afraid," I said. "I just moved faster than the fear did." She looked at me with those violet eyes and seemed to be turning something over in her mind. Then she asked about Earth. I gave her the short version, because the long version tends to ruin people's appetite. I told her about the tectonic activity, and the megafauna, and the weather systems that could level a city, and the fact that human history was essentially one long argument, conducted at high volume, with occasional pauses for invention and art. I told her that the planet had spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything on it, and everything on it had spent 4 billion years refusing to cooperate. "How do you survive something like that?" she asked. I thought about it. "We just refuse to stop," I said. She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars through the observation glass. Her bioluminescence shifted slightly, moving from its neutral silver to something warmer at the edges. I did not know enough about Lyrian biology yet to read exactly what that meant, but it did not feel like discomfort. "You are very strange, Mr. Draven," she said. "Most humans are," I said. "You get used to it." Deathworld was beautiful, in the way that places built entirely to impress are always beautiful, which is to say, it was grand and cold and exhausting. The summit venue was a structure that floated above a silver lake, anchored to the shore by bridges that glowed at night. Every powerful person in 3 sectors was there. Every conversation in that building had 3 meanings, and you had to listen carefully to catch even 2 of them. I caught all 3, always, because I was not there to participate. I was there to watch. I identified the problem within the first hour. Lord Cavan Methsorath was a rival consortium leader, and the polite distance he maintained from Seraphine throughout the opening reception was too precise. It was practiced, and his bodyguard, a tall Druathi with pale chromatophores, was positioned wrong, not watching the crowd, watching Seraphine. I did not go to station security. I did not know them, and I did not trust what I did not know. I repositioned myself instead, quietly, without drawing attention, moving through the room like someone looking for a drink, and ending up exactly where I needed to be. The move came during the third reception, as I knew it would. The first two are always setup. The third is always action. Meth Sorath crossed the room to greet Seraphine personally. It was a natural moment, a politically normal gesture. His hand extended. His ring, a wide silver band with a flat stone, pressed forward in the grip in a way that was barely visible unless you knew what you were looking at. A handshake ring, an old Lyrian method. The stone was porous. The toxin was in the stone. Contact with Lyrian skin for 2 seconds would deliver enough to cause cardiac arrest within an hour, and it would look completely natural. I was across the room in 3 seconds. I stepped between them, extended my own hand, and took Meth Sorath's greeting myself, clasping his hand firmly the way humans do, which is longer and more direct than the Lyrian press. His eyes went wide. He had not expected a human. He had not planned for a human. Nobody ever plans for a human. My hand went numb from the fingers to the wrist in about 4 seconds. There was chaos after that. Seraphine was moved. Security arrived. Meth Sorath was detained. I sat on the floor of the reception hall and injected myself with a broad-spectrum counter from the medkit in my jacket, the one I had been carrying since day one, the one every person in this building had looked at like an embarrassing accessory. The toxin was designed for Lyrian cardiac biology. In a human body, it was deeply unpleasant. It was not fatal. I was back on my feet in 20 minutes. Seraphine came to find me. Her staff had tried to stop her, and she had walked past them, the way people with actual authority always do. She found me sitting against the wall outside the main hall, eating a ration bar from my jacket pocket, and reviewing the next day's schedule because the summit was not over, and there was still work to do. She stood in front of me for a moment. "You should be dead," she said. "So I've been told," I said, usually by things considerably more alarming than a contact toxin. She sat down on the floor beside me. I was slightly surprised. Duchesses do not typically sit on floors. She did not seem to notice or care. "You did the calculation," she said slowly. "In your head, you decided the risk to yourself was acceptable." "I decided you were worth it," I said. "That is literally the job." She looked at me for a long time. "I have had bodyguards my entire life," she said quietly. "They stand at a distance. They manage perimeters. None of them have ever placed themselves between harm and me because they ran the numbers and decided they would probably survive it." "Then you had the wrong guards before," I said. She made a sound that I slowly realized was a laugh. It was soft and a little uneven, like someone who did not laugh very often and was slightly surprised to find themselves doing it. On the journey home, she talked to me differently, not as a client to a contractor, but as someone genuinely trying to understand something unfamiliar. She asked about loyalty, and I told her what I knew, that humans come from a very long line of people who survived by taking care of each other, that somewhere in the deep history of a planet that was doing its very best to end us, we learned that the only way to make it through was together, that the instinct never fully left, even after we got safe enough not to need it as desperately. She asked me to stay on, when we returned to Aurelis Prime, permanently, a direct contract, a cabin on her ship, credentials I would not get anywhere else. I asked her why. She told me the truth, and it was quiet and honest, and more direct than I had expected from someone who lived in a world of 3-layered conversations. "Because no one has ever simply decided I was worth it before," she said. "I find I would like to keep the person who has." I looked out at the stars for a moment. Then I told her I would need to run a full security audit of the station before I agreed to anything, because I had already counted 40 vulnerabilities on the way in, and I was not going to work somewhere I had not checked thoroughly. She stared at me. 40, she said. "Closer to 50, honestly," I said. I was being polite before. Her glow shifted to warm gold. She closed her eyes. She shook her head very slowly. "Welcome aboard, Kale Draven," she said. "Thank you, Your Grace," I said. "I will start with the docking bay."